Baby wolf pup trapped under a fallen tree. Teen hiker noticed its whimpers, and everything changed. The forest stretched endlessly in every direction, thick with Douglas firs and the earthy scent of moss and damp bark. Afternoon light filtered through the canopy in scattered beams, turning the undergrowth into a patchwork of shadow and gold. 17-year-old Ethan Carter moved carefully along the trail, his worn boots crunching softly against pine needles and fallen twigs. He'd been hiking for hours, backpack slung over one shoulder, headphones dangling around his neck. The music had stopped 20 minutes ago. Now he preferred the silence, the whisper of wind through branches, the distant call of a raven, the rhythm of his own breathing. This trail wasn't popular. That's why Ethan liked it. No crowds, no chatter, no forced smiles. Just him and the wilderness, a place where he could think without interruption. School had been suffocating lately. The pressure of college applications, the weight of expectations, the constant noise. Out here, none of that mattered. Out here, he could breathe. He stopped to check his phone. No signal. Perfect. He tucked it back into his pocket and took a long drink from his water bottle, savoring the cold against his throat. The sun would set in a couple of hours, and he still had a good 3 miles before reaching the trailhead where he'd parked his beat-up Honda. He wasn't worried. He knew these woods well enough. That's when he heard it. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe and stay with us. At first, Ethan thought it was a bird, something small and distressed, maybe caught in a bramble. But as he stood still, listening, the sound clarified. It wasn't chirping. It was whimpering, soft, trembling, desperate. The kind of sound that tugged at something primal in the chest, something that demanded attention. He turned toward the noise, stepping off the trail and into the denser brush. Branches caught at his sleeves. His boots sank slightly into softer ground, mulch and decaying leaves giving way beneath him. The whimpering grew louder, more distinct. It wasn't continuous. It came in bursts, separated by exhausted silence, as if whatever was making the sound was running out of strength. Ethan pushed through a thicket of ferns and stopped cold. A massive pine tree had fallen, its trunk easily 4 feet in diameter, roots torn from the earth and splayed out like gnarled fingers. The tree must have come down recently, maybe during the storm 2 nights ago. The bark was still fresh, sap glistening in places, and beneath one of the thicker branches, pinned against a moss-covered boulder, was a tiny grey form, a wolf pup. Ethan's breath caught. He'd seen wolves before, distant shadows moving through the trees, heard their howls echoing at dusk, but never this close, never like this. The pup couldn't have been more than a few weeks old, its fur a soft silvery grey, ears still too large for its head, eyes wide and dark with terror. One of its hind legs was trapped beneath the branch, and it struggled weakly, paws scraping at the dirt, little chest heaving with effort. It saw him and froze, the whimpering cutting off abruptly. Its body went rigid, every muscle tense. Ethan could see the whites of its eyes, the way its lips pulled back just slightly, exposing milk teeth. It was terrified. Of him, of the pain, of being trapped and alone. "Hey," Ethan whispered, barely audible. "Hey, it's okay." The pup didn't move, just stared at him with those huge, terrified eyes. Ethan's mind raced. Wolves were dangerous. He knew that. Even pups. If the mother was nearby, if the pack was close, approaching could be suicide. Wolves were protective, fiercely so, and he was a stranger in their territory. But as he stood there, heart pounding, he saw something that made the decision for him. The pup's leg, the one pinned under the branch, was bent at an unnatural angle. Blood matted the fur around it, and worse, flies had already begun to gather, buzzing lazily around the wound. The pup had been here for a while. Hours, maybe longer. If its family was nearby, they would have freed it by now. Or they would have stayed with it. The pup was alone. Ethan glanced around, scanning the forest for any sign of movement, listening for the rustle of larger bodies moving through the brush. Nothing. Just the wind, the distant trickle of a creek somewhere to the west, the soft hum of insects. He was alone too. He crouched slowly, lowering himself to the pup's level, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The pup flinched, trying to pull itself backward, but the branch held it fast. A fresh whimper escaped its throat, this one edged with pain. Ethan felt his chest tighten. He'd always loved animals, had grown up with dogs, volunteered at the local shelter when he had time. But this was different. This wasn't a domestic creature used to human hands. This was wild, vulnerable, and suffering. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said quietly, his voice low and steady. "I promise. I'm going to help." The pup bared its teeth, a tiny, desperate attempt at intimidation. Ethan almost smiled. It was trying so hard to be fierce, even now, even broken and terrified. There was something heartbreaking about that courage. He shifted his gaze to the branch. It was thick, heavy, wedged firmly against the boulder. He couldn't lift it alone, not without leverage, not without risking the pup's leg further. But maybe he could move the boulder slightly, create just enough space for the pup to slip free. He set his backpack down carefully and pulled out a sturdy water bottle, then looked around for something more useful. A few feet away, a fallen branch, smaller but solid, lay half buried in leaves. Ethan grabbed it, testing its weight. It would work. It had to. He moved closer to the boulder, positioning the branch beneath the larger tree limb like a lever. The pup watched him with unblinking intensity, its small body trembling. Ethan met its gaze for a moment, trying to communicate something, trust, intent, reassurance, but the pup only whimpered again, softer this time, almost resigned. "Just hold on," Ethan murmured, "just a little longer." He pressed down on the lever, putting all his weight into it. The branch groaned, the tree shifted slightly, and the pup yelped, a sharp, piercing sound that made Ethan's stomach drop. He eased off immediately, breathing hard. "Sorry, sorry," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I'm sorry." He adjusted his position, found a better angle, and tried again. This time the movement was steadier. The branch lifted just an inch, then two. The pup scrambled instinctively, trying to pull itself free, but the injured leg wouldn't cooperate. Ethan held the lever in place, muscles burning, sweat beading on his forehead. "Come on," he urged. "Come on, you can do it." The pup twisted, dragging itself forward with its front legs, and suddenly, finally, it was free. Ethan let go of the lever, and the branch crashed back down with a heavy thud. The pup stumbled forward a few steps, then collapsed onto its side, panting heavily. Ethan stayed perfectly still, watching. The pup's leg was clearly broken, the limb hanging limply, and blood still oozed from where the bark had scraped the skin raw. But it was free. It was alive. And it was looking at him again, not with fear this time, but with something else. Something uncertain, cautious, but no longer hostile. Ethan's mind raced. He couldn't leave it here, not like this. Injured, bleeding, unable to walk, it wouldn't last the night. Predators would find it, or it would die from shock and exposure. But what could he do? Take it with him? Carry a wild wolf pup 3 miles through the forest? He thought of his phone. No signal. He thought of help. Wildlife services. A ranger station. But the nearest one was over an hour's drive away, and he'd have to leave the pup here alone to get there. The pup whimpered again, softer now, and Ethan felt something shift inside him, a decision made not with logic, but with instinct. He pulled off his jacket slowly, moving with exaggerated care. The pup tensed, but didn't try to flee. It couldn't. Ethan bundled the jacket into a makeshift cradle, then inched closer, speaking in low, soothing tones the entire time. "It's okay. I've got you. You're safe now." When he reached out, the pup snapped weakly at his hand. A reflex more than an attack. Ethan didn't pull back. He waited, hand hovering, until the pup's breathing slowed just slightly. Then, in one smooth motion, he scooped the small body into the jacket, wrapping it gently but firmly. The pup struggled for a moment, then went still, exhausted. Ethan cradled it against his chest, feeling the rapid flutter of its heartbeat through the fabric. It weighed almost nothing, just a fragile bundle of fur and bone and terror. "I've got you," he whispered again. "Everything's gonna be okay." He didn't know if that was true, but as he turned back toward the trail, the pup trembling in his arms, Ethan knew one thing for certain. He couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. The walk back was harder than Ethan anticipated. The pup remained still in his arms for the first few minutes, its small body rigid with shock and exhaustion. But as Ethan navigated the uneven terrain, stepping carefully over roots and rocks, the movement seemed to agitate the injury. The pup whimpered intermittently, each soft cry sending a spike of guilt through Ethan's chest. He tried to keep his steps smooth, his arms steady, but the trail was unforgiving, steep in places, littered with obstacles. "I know," he murmured, adjusting his grip. "I know it hurts. Just hang on." The sun was lower now, casting long shadows across the forest floor. Ethan estimated he had maybe 90 minutes of decent light left. He picked up his pace, though every instinct told him to be careful, to go slow. The pup needed help, real help, and he needed to get it somewhere safe before darkness fell completely. As he walked, his mind churned. What was he doing? Taking a wild animal, a wolf, away from its habitat? It was illegal, probably. Dangerous, definitely. If anyone found out, he could face serious consequences. Wildlife protection laws were strict in this region, and for good reason. Wolves were slowly recovering from near extinction here, their population still fragile, still monitored. Interfering could bring federal charges, but what was the alternative? Leave the pup to die? Call wildlife services and wait hours for someone to arrive, assuming they even could? By then, the pup might be gone, bled out, gone into shock, or dragged off by a mountain lion or bear. No. Ethan had made his choice the moment he lifted that branch. There was no turning back now. He thought about his parents. His mom would panic, she always did. She worried about everything, his grades, his future, his safety. This would send her into full crisis mode. His dad, on the other hand, might surprise him. He'd grown up on a ranch in Montana, had a practical view of nature and survival. He might understand, or he might be furious. Hard to say. Ethan hadn't always been the kind of person who rushed toward trouble. In fact, for most of his life, he'd been the opposite, cautious, rule-following. The kid who did his homework on time and never talked back. But something had shifted over the past year. Maybe it was the pressure. The constant demands to have everything figured out. College, career, future. Everyone expected him to have answers, to know exactly who he was and what he wanted. But he didn't. Most days he felt like he was drifting, going through the motions without any real sense of direction. His friends had their plans: engineering, pre-med, business school. They talked about internships and resumes and networking. And Ethan nodded along, pretending he cared, pretending he knew what he was doing. The truth was, he felt most like himself out here, in the woods, away from expectations and noise. There was something honest about nature, brutal and beautiful in equal measure. It didn't pretend to be anything other than what it was. Maybe that's why he couldn't leave the pup. Because it was real. Its suffering was real, its need was real, and for once, Ethan knew exactly what he had to do. No ambiguity, no second-guessing. Just action. The pup stirred in his arms, a faint tremor running through its body. Ethan glanced down. The small head had shifted slightly, and the pup's eyes, those dark, liquid eyes, were open, staring up at him. Not with fear now, but with something more guarded, watchful, assessing. "Hey there," Ethan said softly. "Still with me?" The pup blinked slowly, its breathing steadier than before. Ethan took that as a good sign. Shock could kill as surely as blood loss, but if the pup was alert, aware, that meant it was fighting, that meant it had a chance. He shifted the bundle carefully, trying to relieve pressure on the injured leg. The pup flinched but didn't struggle. It seemed to understand on some instinctive level that Ethan wasn't a threat. Or maybe it was just too weak to resist anymore. Either way, a fragile truce had formed between them. The trail opened up ahead, the path widening as it descended toward the lower valley. Ethan recognized the landmarks, the split boulder shaped like a tooth, the ancient cedar with the lightning scar. He was getting close, another mile, maybe less. His arms ached. The pup didn't weigh much, but holding it steady for this long, maintaining constant awareness of every step, every jostle, it was draining. Sweat soaked through his shirt despite the cooling air. His shoulders burned, but he didn't stop, couldn't stop. He thought about what would happen next. He couldn't take the pup to a vet, not a regular one. They'd ask questions, probably report him. But there was Dr. Kalinsky, the wildlife veterinarian who ran a small rehabilitation center about 40 minutes from town. Ethan had volunteered there once, a summer program through school. Dr. Kalinsky was gruff but fair, more interested in saving animals than following bureaucratic protocols. If anyone would help without making it complicated, it would be her. But first, he had to get the pup to his car, then home, at least briefly, to stabilize it. Then to Dr. Kalinsky. Each step was a problem to solve, a hurdle to clear. The pup whimpered again, and Ethan felt its small body tense. He looked down and saw the blood had seeped through his jacket, a dark stain spreading across the fabric. His stomach tightened. The wound was worse than he thought, or the movement had reopened it. Either way, time was running out. "Almost there," he said, though he wasn't sure if he was reassuring the pup or himself. "Just hold on, please." The forest seemed to close in as the light faded, shadows deepening, the air growing cooler. Ethan's breath came faster now, his pace quickening despite the fatigue. The pup's eyes had closed again, its breathing shallow but steady. Ethan pressed his hand gently against its chest, feeling the faint thrum of its heartbeat. Still alive, still fighting. He thought about the mother wolf, wherever she was. Had she abandoned the pup when it got trapped? Or had something happened to her? Hunters, disease, an accident of her own? Wolf packs were tight-knit, fiercely protective. For a pup to be alone like this, something must have gone terribly wrong. A wave of sadness washed over him. This tiny creature had already endured so much: pain, fear, abandonment. And now its survival depended on a 17-year-old kid who had no idea what he was doing. But Ethan pushed the doubt aside. He'd figure it out. He had to. The trailhead came into view, the small gravel parking area bathed in the golden light of late afternoon. Ethan's Honda sat alone, exactly where he'd left it. Relief flooded through him. He quickened his steps, boots crunching on gravel as he crossed to the car. He fumbled with his keys one-handed, finally managing to unlock the back door. He'd laid an old blanket across the seat this morning. Habit from years of hauling camping gear and muddy hiking boots. Now he carefully placed the bundled pup onto it, arranging the jacket so the injured leg was supported and elevated. The pup's eyes opened briefly, a flash of panic crossing its face at the unfamiliar surroundings. But Ethan's voice, low and constant, seemed to calm it. "You're okay. We're going to get you help. I promise." He closed the door gently and jogged to the driver's seat, starting the engine with shaking hands. His phone, now that he was back in range, buzzed with notifications. Texts from his mom asking when he'd be home, a reminder about an essay due Monday, messages from friends he'd been ignoring. He swiped them away and pulled up Dr. Kalinsky's number, saved from 2 summers ago. The phone rang 4 times before a gruff voice answered. "Kalinsky. Dr. Kalinsky, it's Ethan Carter. I volunteered at your center a couple years ago. I need help. I found an injured wolf pup in the forest. It's bad. Broken leg, bleeding. I didn't know who else to call." There was a pause, then a heavy sigh. "Where are you now?" "About 40 minutes from town. I can bring it to you." "A wolf pup. Ethan, you know that's—" I know it's complicated, but I couldn't leave it, please." Another pause, longer this time. Ethan held his breath, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. "All right." Dr. Kalinsky said finally. "Bring it to the center, back entrance. I'll be waiting. And Ethan, drive carefully. Keep it warm and stable." "Thank you," Ethan breathed. "Thank you so much." He ended the call and glanced in the rearview mirror. The pup lay still, its small chest rising and falling in shallow rhythm. Its eyes were closed again, but something about its posture seemed less rigid, almost peaceful. Ethan pulled out of the parking area and onto the winding forest road, driving as smoothly as he could, taking every curve with exaggerated care. The sun touched the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rose. And in the back seat, cradled in his jacket, a tiny life held on. Everything had changed. Ethan didn't fully understand how yet, or what it would mean, but as he drove through the fading light, the weight of responsibility settling into his bones, he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wouldn't let this pup die. Not today. Not ever, if he could help it. The rehabilitation center sat at the edge of town, a converted barn surrounded by dense pine forest and chain-link enclosures. Ethan had been here twice before during his volunteer stint, once to help feed orphaned raccoons, once to clean out the raptor aviaries. Back then, it had seemed like a peaceful place, almost idyllic. Now, arriving in near darkness with an injured wolf pup in his back seat, it felt like a last desperate refuge. He pulled around to the back entrance as instructed, his headlights sweeping across weathered wood and a small gravel lot. Dr. Kalinsky was already there, waiting beneath a single flickering bulb, arms crossed over her heavy flannel shirt. She was in her early 60s, broad-shouldered and sturdy, with steel-grey hair pulled back in a no-nonsense ponytail. Her face was deeply lined, carved by decades of sun and stress, but her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Ethan killed the engine and jumped out, moving quickly to the back door. Dr. Kalinsky was beside him before he'd even opened it, peering in at the bundled form on the seat. "Careful," she said, her voice clipped and professional. "Let me see it first." Ethan stepped back, and she leaned in, her practiced hands pulling back the jacket just enough to assess the pup. Her expression didn't change, but Ethan saw her jaw tighten. That told him everything he needed to know. "Bring it inside," she said. "Gently, support the hind leg. Don't let it dangle." Ethan lifted the bundle carefully, cradling it against his chest the way he had for the entire hike. The pup stirred weakly, a soft whine escaping its throat. Dr. Kalinsky was already moving toward the door, holding it open with one hip. "Through here, exam room." The interior was warmer, smelling of antiseptic and hay and something faintly medicinal. They passed through a narrow hallway, lined with shelves of supplies, syringes, bandages, bottles of medication, and into a small, brightly lit room. A stainless steel examination table dominated the center, surrounded by cabinets and equipment that looked both well-used and meticulously maintained. "On the table," Dr. Kalinsky instructed, pulling on latex gloves with swift efficiency. "Unwrap it slowly. Watch for the teeth." Ethan laid the pup down and carefully peeled back the jacket. The pup's eyes opened, wide and frightened, and it tried to scramble away, but its injured leg buckled immediately. A sharp yelp pierced the air, and Ethan's heart clenched. "Easy, little one," Dr. Kalinsky murmured, her voice softening in a way Ethan hadn't expected. Her hands moved over the pup's body with practiced gentleness, checking vitals, examining the wound. "You've been through hell, haven't you?" The pup snapped weakly at her fingers, but she was already anticipating the movement, pulling back just in time. She reached for a syringe, filling it with a clear liquid. "Mild sedative," she explained, glancing at Ethan. "Just enough to take the edge off the pain and calm it down. It's in shock and terrified. We need to work fast." She administered the injection with a smooth, confident motion. The pup flinched, then gradually began to relax, its breathing slowing, the wild panic in its eyes dimming to a glassy haze. Dr. Kalinsky worked in focused silence, cleaning the wound with antiseptic solution, her brow furrowed in concentration. Ethan stood to the side, feeling useless and out of place. His hands were shaking, adrenaline still coursing through him from the hike, the drive, the sheer weight of what he'd done. "How bad is it?" he asked finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "Doctor." Kalinski didn't answer immediately. She continued her examination, probing the broken leg carefully, checking the pup's gums, listening to its heartbeat with a stethoscope. When she finally straightened, pulling off her gloves, her expression was grave. "The leg is fractured in 2 places, tibia and fibula. Clean breaks, which is good, but there's significant soft tissue damage, and the wound is already showing early signs of infection. It's been trapped for at least 12 hours, maybe longer. The fact that it's still alive is, honestly, remarkable." Ethan felt his throat tighten. "Can you save it?" Dr. Kalinski met his gaze, her eyes unreadable. "I can try, but Ethan, you need to understand something. This isn't a dog. It's a grey wolf, Canis lupus. They're a protected species, federally protected. What you did, bringing it here instead of calling wildlife services, it's technically illegal. I'm required by law to report this." Ethan's stomach dropped. "But I couldn't just leave it. It would have died." "I know, and I'm not saying you were wrong, I'm saying there are consequences." She paused, studying him. "Wildlife services would have sent someone eventually, maybe in 6 or 8 hours. By then, yes, the pup would likely be dead. You probably saved its life, but now we're in a grey area, no pun intended." "So what do we do?" Ethan asked, desperation creeping into his voice. Dr. Kalinski sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I'm going to treat it. Stabilize the leg, start antibiotics, fluids, then I need to make some calls. There are protocols for situations like this, wildlife rehabilitation permits, federal oversight. If we handle this right, we might be able to keep it here for recovery before releasing it back into the wild. If we handle it wrong, they'll take the pup, you'll face charges, and I could lose my license." The weight of her words settled over Ethan like a physical thing. He'd been so focused on saving the pup, on doing the right thing, that he hadn't fully considered the ramifications. But even now, standing in the harsh fluorescent light, with those possibilities looming, he didn't regret it. "I'll take responsibility," he said firmly. "Whatever happens, it's on me, not you." Dr. Kalinski's expression softened slightly, something almost like respect flickering in her eyes. "You're a good kid, Ethan. Stupid maybe, but good." She turned back to the pup, which now lay in a semi-conscious state, its small body finally at rest. "Let's focus on keeping this little fighter alive. The rest we'll figure out later." She moved to a cabinet, pulling out supplies, splinting materials, IV equipment, medication bottles. Ethan watched as she worked with the smooth efficiency of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. She set up an IV line, the needle sliding into the pup's tiny foreleg with barely a flinch. Fluids began dripping steadily. "Dehydration is a major concern," she explained as she worked. "It's lost blood, been in shock, probably hasn't eaten or nursed in over a day. We need to get fluids into it, stabilize its vitals, then deal with the leg." "Will it need surgery?" Ethan asked. "Probably. Not tonight, it's too weak, too unstable. But in a day or 2, if it pulls through, yes. I'll need to pin the bones, make sure they heal properly. Otherwise, it'll never walk right. And a wolf that can't run—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Ethan felt a lump forming in his throat. He'd never thought beyond the immediate rescue. He hadn't imagined weeks of recovery, surgery, rehabilitation. He hadn't imagined the pup might be permanently damaged, might never return to the wild where it belonged. "What are its chances?" he asked quietly. Dr. Kalinski paused, her hands stilling over the splinting materials. "Honestly, 50-50, maybe less. Pups this young are resilient, but they're also fragile. Infection, shock, complications from surgery, any of those could kill it. And even if it survives physically, there's the psychological aspect. Wolf pups imprint early. It's already experienced severe trauma, and now it's being handled by humans. That changes something fundamental." "What do you mean?" She looked at him, her expression serious. If we save it, if it recovers, we have to ask, can it go back? Will it be afraid of humans now, or will it be too comfortable around them? A wolf that approaches humans is a dead wolf, Ethan. Either someone shoots it, or it gets hit by a car, or it gets itself into trouble that ends the same way. Rehabilitation isn't just about healing the body, it's about preparing them to survive in the wild. And sometimes, she trailed off, shaking her head. Sometimes, despite our best efforts, that's not possible. The room felt colder suddenly. Ethan looked at the pup, now utterly still, except for the shallow rise and fall of its chest. So small, so vulnerable. He'd thought saving it would be enough. He'd thought that was where the story ended. Rescue, recovery, happy ending. But this was just the beginning. I want to help, Ethan said suddenly. Whatever it takes, I can come here after school on weekends. I can clean cages, feed animals, whatever you need. Just let me be part of this, please. Dr. Kalinsky studied him for a long moment, her weathered face unreadable. Then slowly, she nodded. All right, but this isn't a pet, and this isn't a fairy tale. This is hard work, and it's going to hurt. You're going to get attached, and then one day, if we're lucky, you're going to have to let it go. Can you handle that? Ethan swallowed hard, then nodded. Yes. Good. Then grab those gauze pads from the top drawer. We've got work to do. They worked together for the next 2 hours, Dr. Kalinsky guiding Ethan through each step. They splinted the leg carefully, wrapping it in layers of padding and rigid support. They shaved the wound area, cleaned it thoroughly, applied antibiotic ointment and fresh bandages. The pup remained sedated throughout, occasionally twitching or whimpering softly, but otherwise still. By the time they finished, Ethan was exhausted, physically, emotionally, completely drained. But when Dr. Kalinsky carefully lifted the pup and placed it in a small recovery kennel lined with soft blankets and a heating pad, when she adjusted the IV line and stepped back to observe their work, Ethan felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. It'll stay here tonight, Dr. Kalinsky said, closing the kennel door. I'll monitor it every few hours. If it makes it through the night, that's a good sign. You should go home, get some sleep, come back tomorrow afternoon, and we'll see where we stand. Ethan nodded, but he couldn't take his eyes off the pup. It looked so small in the kennel, so impossibly fragile. Its chest moved with each breath, steady but labored. One small paw twitched, as if dreaming. What if it doesn't make it? He asked quietly. Dr. Kalinsky's hand came to rest on his shoulder, a brief but solid touch. Then you gave it a chance it wouldn't have had otherwise. That matters, Ethan. Even if it's not enough, it still matters. He turned to look at her, and for the first time, he saw past the gruff exterior to the person beneath. Someone who dedicated her life to saving creatures that couldn't save themselves. Someone who'd seen countless failures and still showed up every day to try again. Thank you, he said, for helping, for taking the risk. She nodded once, then gestured toward the door. Go, before your mother sends out a search party. Ethan managed a weak smile and headed for the exit. But at the doorway he paused, looking back one last time at the kennel, at the tiny grey form barely visible beneath the blankets. Fight, he whispered. Please fight. Then he stepped out into the cold night air, leaving a piece of his heart behind. Ethan didn't sleep that night. He'd driven home in a daze, arriving well past dinner time to find his mother pacing the kitchen, her phone clutched in one hand. The lecture had been immediate and predictable. Where have you been? Why didn't you answer your phone? Do you have any idea how worried I was? But Ethan had barely heard it. He'd mumbled something about losing track of time on the trail, promised it wouldn't happen again, and retreated to his room before she could press for details. Now he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind churning with images he couldn't shake. The pup's terrified eyes, the blood soaking through his jacket. Dr. Kalinsky's words, 50-50, maybe less. He checked his phone for the 100th time. 2:47 a.m. No messages, no calls. He'd given Dr. Kalinsky his number, made her promise to contact him if anything changed. The silence felt both reassuring and unbearable. What if the pup was suffering right now? What if it had taken a turn, stopped breathing, slipped away, while Ethan lay here uselessly in his comfortable bed? The thought made his chest tighten with anxiety. He'd been the one to move it, to carry it miles through the forest, to subject it to the trauma of transportation and treatment. What if all of that had been too much? What if he'd made everything worse? At 3:15 a.m., he gave up on sleep entirely. He pulled on sweatpants and a hoodie, crept downstairs in the darkness, and made coffee he didn't really want. The house was silent, except for the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of settling wood. Through the kitchen window, he could see the forest beyond their backyard, a wall of shadow beneath a sky scattered with stars. His father found him there an hour later, sitting at the kitchen table with his second cup of coffee and a biology textbook he wasn't really reading. "You're up early," Thomas Carter said, his voice rough with sleep. He was a tall man, lean and weathered, with the kind of hands that spoke of decades of physical work. He'd sold the ranch years ago when they moved to Oregon, but he'd never lost that ranch's quality. Practical, observant, unshakable. Couldn't sleep, Ethan admitted. His father poured his own coffee and sat down across from him, studying his son with that quiet intensity that always made Ethan feel simultaneously seen and exposed. "Want to talk about it?" Ethan hesitated. His father wasn't the type to overreact, but this was complicated. Still, keeping it secret felt worse than the risk of telling the truth. "I found something yesterday," he began slowly. "In the forest. An animal. It was hurt. Trapped under a fallen tree. I couldn't just leave it there." His father's expression didn't change. "What kind of animal?" "A wolf pup." Thomas Carter's eyebrows rose slightly, but otherwise his face remained neutral. "A wolf. I took it to Dr. Kalinsky's rehabilitation center. She's treating it, but—" Ethan's voice cracked slightly. "It might not make it, and even if it does, there could be legal problems. Wolves are protected. I'm not supposed to interfere." His father was quiet for a long moment, sipping his coffee, processing. Then, "Did you do what you thought was right?" "Yes." "Would you do it again, knowing what you know now?" Ethan didn't hesitate. "Yes." A small smile tugged at the corner of his father's mouth. "Then you made the right choice. The rest is just details to work through." He set his mug down, leaning forward slightly. "Your grandfather used to say something when I was your age, working the ranch. He said, 'Courage isn't the absence of consequences, it's the willingness to face them.' You did a brave thing, son. Don't let the complications make you forget that." Something loosened in Ethan's chest, a knot of tension he hadn't realized he'd been carrying. "Mom's going to freak out when she finds out." "Probably," his father agreed, "but she'll come around. She always does." He stood, squeezing Ethan's shoulder as he passed. "Get some rest. You look like hell." But Ethan couldn't rest. At 6:30 a.m., he texted Dr. Kalinsky. "Any updates? How is it doing?" The response came 20 minutes later. "Stable. Vitals holding. Made it through the night. That's good. Come by after school." Relief flooded through him so powerfully it was almost dizzying. Made it through the night. The pup was still alive, still fighting. School that day was torture. Ethan sat through classes in a fog, unable to focus on lectures or assignments. His friends noticed. Jake asked twice if he was okay. Maya texted asking if he wanted to grab lunch, but he brushed them off. How could he explain? How could he make them understand the weight he was carrying? The tiny life that depended on decisions he didn't feel qualified to make. At 3:15 p.m., the final bell rang, and Ethan was out the door before most students had even gathered their things. He drove straight to the rehabilitation center, his heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. Dr. Kalinsky met him at the back entrance, clipboard in hand. She looked tired, deep shadows under her eyes, her flannel shirt rumpled, but there was something almost bright in her expression. "It ate," she said without preamble. "Not much, maybe 2 ounces of formula from a syringe, but it swallowed. kept it down. That's a very good sign. Can I see it? Ethan asked. She led him through the facility to a small recovery room, separate from the main kennel area. Inside, the temperature was warm, almost tropical, and the lighting was soft. The pup lay in the same kennel as the night before, but it looked different somehow. More alert. Its eyes were open, tracking their movement as they entered. It's still on pain medication and antibiotics through the IV, Dr. Kalinsky explained, kneeling beside the kennel. The sedative wore off around dawn, and it's been awake on and off since then, mostly sleeping but responsive. Temperature is stabilizing. No signs of sepsis yet, which is our biggest concern. Ethan crouched beside her, his face level with the kennel door. The pup watched him warily, ears pinned back, but it didn't growl or try to retreat, just watched. "Hey," Ethan said softly. "Remember me?" The pup's nose twitched, scenting him. Something shifted in its expression. Not recognition exactly, but perhaps a faint memory. The fear seemed less acute than the night before. "It knows your scent," Dr. Kalinsky observed. "That's both good and bad. Good because familiar equals safe right now, which reduces stress. Bad because we don't want it bonding with humans. That's the tightrope we're walking." "What happens now?" Ethan asked. "Now we wait, monitor, keep treating the infection and supporting its system. In 72 hours, if it's still stable, I'll do the surgery to pin the leg. After that, 6 to 8 weeks of recovery, physical therapy, relearning to walk. Then, if everything goes perfectly, we assess whether it's a candidate for release. And if it's not?" Dr. Kalinsky's jaw tightened. "Then we have difficult decisions to make. But let's cross that bridge when we come to it." She stood, brushing off her knees. "I called Wildlife Services this morning, reported the situation, filed the paperwork. They're sending an inspector in a few days to assess whether we're equipped to handle long-term rehabilitation of a grey wolf. If they approve, we get a temporary permit. If not," she shrugged, "they'll take custody. And then what? What would they do with it? Depends. If it's healthy enough, they might transfer it to a larger facility. More likely, given its age and condition." She trailed off, but Ethan understood. "They'd euthanize it. It's a protected species, Ethan. They don't have unlimited resources. A severely injured pup with questionable release potential. The practical choice is, no." The word came out sharper than he intended. "No, we can't let that happen." Dr. Kalinsky's expression softened. "Then we need to prove this pup is worth the investment. That means keeping it alive, getting it healthy, and demonstrating that it can be successfully rehabilitated. That's not going to be easy. I don't care. I'll do whatever it takes." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "All right. Then here's what we need. First, this place needs to be spotless when the inspector arrives. Every enclosure clean, every record updated, every protocol followed to the letter. Second, we need to show we have the resources, volunteer help, funding, expertise to handle specialized wildlife rehabilitation. Third, the pup needs to be thriving, not just surviving. They need to see progress." "What can I do?" Ethan asked immediately. "Everything. You're here every day after school, weekends too. You help with feeding, cleaning, medical care, documentation, all of it. You learn everything I can teach you about wolf behavior, rehabilitation techniques, wildlife management, and most importantly," she paused, her gaze intense, "you do it without getting attached. This isn't a pet. This isn't yours. You're a caretaker preparing it for release." "Can you do that?" Ethan looked at the pup, its small body curled in the blankets, its dark eyes watching him with that unsettling mixture of fear and curiosity. Already, something had taken root in his chest, a fierce, protective feeling that had nothing to do with reason, and everything to do with the bone-deep certainty that this creature mattered. "I can do it," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he wasn't sure they were true. "Doctor." Kalinsky seemed to sense his doubt, but she didn't press. Instead, she handed him the clipboard. "Then let's start. These are the feeding schedules, medication logs, and observation charts. Every 4 hours we check vitals. Every 6, we attempt feeding. Every 12, we change bandages and check the IV site. You're going to learn all of it. They worked together through the afternoon and into the evening. Ethan learned how to check a pulse on an animal so small his fingers felt clumsy and oversized. He learned to read temperature, respiration rate, capillary refill time. He learned to mix formula, draw medication, recognize signs of distress or improvement. And through it all, the pup watched, sometimes sleeping, sometimes alert, but always aware of Ethan's presence. And Ethan found himself talking to it. Soft, meaningless words meant more for comfort than communication. You're going to be okay. You're strong. You're a fighter. By 9 p.m., when Dr. Kalinsky finally sent him home, Ethan was exhausted but energized in a way he'd never felt before. He had purpose. He had a mission. The vague uncertainty that had plagued him for months, the questions about his future, his identity, his place in the world, all of it faded into the background. Right now, in this moment, he knew exactly who he was. He was the person who would save this wolf, whatever it took. The surgery was scheduled for Thursday morning, 72 hours after Ethan had carried the pup out of the forest. Those 3 days had been a blur of routine and vigilance. Ethan arrived at the rehabilitation center every day at 3:30 p.m. and stayed until Dr. Kalinsky forced him to leave, usually around 10 p.m. He learned the rhythms of the place, the feeding schedules, the cleaning protocols, the subtle signs that separated a recovering animal from one in decline. He helped with other residents too, a red-tailed hawk with a damaged wing, a trio of orphaned raccoons, a young doe recovering from a car collision. But the pup was always his focus. It had grown stronger, incrementally, but noticeably. The fear in its eyes had dimmed, replaced by a wary curiosity. It took formula more readily now, even seemed to anticipate feeding times. Its temperature had stabilized, and the wound showed signs of healing. Pink tissue forming at the edges, the angry redness receding. Dr. Kalinsky had reduced the pain medication, and the pup had started making small sounds. Not quite howls, but soft, plaintive whines that twisted something in Ethan's chest. It's calling for its pack, Dr. Kalinsky had explained. That's instinct. It knows it's alone, and it's trying to reach them. Ethan had stayed late that night, sitting beside the kennel, speaking in low tones, until the pup finally settled into sleep. Now, standing in the pre-op area at 7 a.m. on Thursday, watching Dr. Kalinsky prepare her instruments with meticulous care, Ethan felt fear coiling in his gut like a living thing. "You don't have to be here for this," Dr. Kalinsky said, not looking up from her work. "It's not going to be easy to watch." "I want to be here," Ethan replied. "I need to be." She glanced at him, assessing, then nodded. "All right, but if you feel faint, sit down immediately. I can't have you cracking your head open on my floor." The pup had been sedated an hour earlier, the anesthesia administered with careful precision. Now it lay utterly still on the surgical table, its small body draped in sterile cloths, only the injured leg exposed. Under the harsh lights, the extent of the damage was starkly visible, the fractures, the bruising, the raw tissue where bark had torn through skin. Dr. Kalinsky worked with absolute focus, her hands steady despite the delicacy of the task. She made the first incision, and Ethan forced himself to watch, to not look away. This was part of it, the hard part, the part that required unflinching commitment. "The tibia is the primary concern," she murmured, more to herself than to Ethan. "The fibula should heal on its own once we stabilize the main bone. I'm going to insert 2 pins here." Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, drilling with a precision that seemed almost impossible given the size of the bones she was working with. Minutes stretched into an hour. Ethan's legs ached from standing, but he didn't move. He watched every step, the placement of the pins, the careful alignment of bone fragments, the sutures that would hold everything together. The pup's chest rose and fell with mechanical steadiness, the anesthesia keeping it in a deep, dreamless state. "Almost there," Dr. Kalinsky said, her voice tight with concentration. "Just need to close," and the monitor beside the table emitted a sharp, discordant beep. Dr. Kalinsky's head snapped up, her eyes finding the screen. Heart rates dropping. Ethan's own heart seemed to stop. What? Why? Reaction to the anesthesia, maybe. Stress. Could be a dozen things. Her hands never stopped moving, finishing the final suture even as she barked instructions. "Ethan, cabinet behind you, third drawer. There's a syringe labeled epinephrine. Bring it, now." Ethan spun, his hands shaking as he yanked open the drawer. Bottles and syringes clattered, and for one horrible moment he couldn't find it, couldn't focus, his vision narrowing with panic. Then his fingers closed around the correct one. Got it! He turned back, and Dr. Kalinsky was already extending her hand. She took the syringe, checked the dosage with a single glance, and administered it directly into the IV line. The monitor continued its alarming rhythm. The numbers on the screen fell, heart rate dropping from 60 to 55, 55 to 50. "Come on," Dr. Kalinsky muttered, her jaw clenched. "Come on, little one. Fight!" Ethan couldn't breathe. He stared at the pup's small chest, watching for movement, for any sign that it was still there, still fighting. The room felt impossibly cold. Time seemed to slow, each second stretching into eternity. 48, 45. "Dr. Kalinsky, I see it." Her hands moved to the pup's chest, beginning compressions, tiny, careful pushes that looked absurdly gentle, but Ethan knew were calibrated precisely. "Come on. You didn't survive 3 days just to quit now. Come on." 42. Ethan felt tears burning in his eyes. This couldn't be happening. Not after everything. Not after the pup had fought so hard, had made it this far. He stepped closer, his hand hovering over the small grey head, wanting to touch, to comfort, but afraid to interfere. "Please," he whispered, "please, don't go." Dr. Kalinsky continued compressions, her face set in fierce concentration. 15 seconds, 30, 45, and then a flicker on the monitor. A single beat, stronger than before. "There," Dr. Kalinsky said. "There we go." Another beat, then another, the rhythm stabilizing, climbing. 50, 55, 60. Dr. Kalinsky kept her hands on the pup's chest for another minute, monitoring, ready to intervene again if needed. But the heart rate continued to rise, settling back into a steady, strong pattern. She finally stepped back, exhaling a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep in her core. Okay, we're good, it's stable." Ethan realized he was shaking. His legs felt weak, and he had to grip the edge of the table to stay upright. What happened? Young animals sometimes have unpredictable reactions to anesthesia. Their systems are still developing, still learning to regulate under stress. She stripped off her surgical gloves, her hands trembling slightly, the first sign of vulnerability Ethan had ever seen from her. That was close, too close. But it's okay now. It's going to be okay. The surgery was successful. The leg is pinned and should heal properly, but the next few hours are critical. We need to monitor it constantly as it comes out of anesthesia. Any complications, any sign of distress, and we intervene immediately. She moved to remove the surgical draping, revealing the pup in its entirety. It looked so small, so fragile, the new bandaging bright white against its grey fur. But its chest moved steadily, and the monitor showed strong, stable vitals. "I'll stay," Ethan said. "All night if I have to. I'll watch it." Dr. Kalinsky looked at him, her expression unreadable. "You have school tomorrow." "I don't care." "Your parents, I'll call them, I'll explain, but I'm not leaving. Not tonight." For a long moment they stood in silence, the only sound the steady beep of the monitor. Then Dr. Kalinsky nodded slowly. "All right, we'll move it to the recovery room. I'll show you what to watch for, what's normal and what's dangerous. And Ethan," she met his gaze squarely, "thank you for being here, for—" She gestured vaguely at the table, at the pup, at everything. "For caring this much." They transferred the pup carefully to the recovery kennel, settling it on fresh blankets with a heating pad set to low. Dr. Kalinsky showed Ethan the signs to watch for: gum color, breathing rate, the slow return to consciousness that should be gradual, not sudden. "I'll be in my office," she said. "Come get me immediately if anything changes. Anything at all." Then she left, and Ethan was alone with the pup. He pulled a chair close to the kennel and sat, his eyes never leaving the small grey form. The building was quiet around him. Occasional rustles from the other animal enclosures, the hum of equipment, the settling of old wood. Outside, rain had begun to fall, a soft patter against the windows. Hours passed. Ethan texted his parents. His father responded with a simple, "Understood, stay safe," and settled in for the long night. He watched as the pup began to stir around 11 p.m., small twitches of its ears, movements of its paws. The eyes fluttered open briefly, unfocused and glazed, then closed again. At midnight, it whimpered, a small, lost sound that pierced straight through Ethan's heart. He opened the kennel door slowly, carefully, and reached in. His hand hovered over the pup's head for a moment, then gently made contact. The fur was soft, impossibly soft, warm beneath his fingers. The pup stilled at the touch, its breathing evening out. Ethan kept his hand there, offering what comfort he could, the reassurance of presence, of not being alone. "You're okay," he murmured. "You made it. You're so brave, so strong." The pup's eyes opened again, clearer this time. They focused on Ethan's face, and for a moment something passed between them. Recognition, trust, a bond forged in shared struggle. It was the moment Dr. Kalinsky had warned him about, the moment he should have pulled back, maintained distance, remembered that this was a wild animal, not a pet, not his. But Ethan didn't pull back. He stayed there, hand resting gently on the pup's head, and made a silent promise. "I won't let anything happen to you. Whatever it takes, however long it takes, I'll make sure you're safe." The pup's eyes closed again, but its body had relaxed completely, the tension draining away. Ethan felt it too, the fear that had gripped him since the surgery slowly loosening its hold. They'd made it through the worst. Together. By 3 a.m., the pup was resting peacefully, its vitals strong and stable. Ethan finally allowed himself to lean back in the chair, exhaustion crashing over him like a wave. His eyes grew heavy, and though he tried to fight it, sleep eventually pulled him under. He dreamed of forests and running, of a small grey shape moving through trees with impossible grace, free and wild and whole. When Dr. Kalinsky found him at dawn, still slumped in the chair beside the kennel, she didn't wake him immediately. She checked the pup first, noted the strong pulse, the healthy color, the peaceful rest, and allowed herself a small smile. They'd done it. Against the odds, despite the complications, they'd saved this tiny life. And in the process, she suspected it had saved something in Ethan too. The weeks that followed the surgery became the most purposeful of Ethan's life. Every day followed the same pattern. School until 3:15 p.m., then straight to the rehabilitation center until late evening. His grades didn't suffer. If anything, they improved. He worked with newfound focus, finishing assignments quickly so he could spend maximum time with the pup. His friends stopped asking him to hang out. His college application sat half-finished on his desk. None of it seemed to matter compared to the small grey life that depended on him. The pup healed with remarkable speed. Within a week of surgery, it was putting tentative weight on the injured leg. Within 2 weeks, it was standing, wobbling, but determined. By the 3rd week, it took its first halting steps, and Ethan felt a surge of pride so intense it brought tears to his eyes. But with the healing came complications of a different kind. The pup had stopped fearing humans entirely. When Ethan entered the recovery room, it would press against the kennel door, whining with excitement. It had learned to recognize his footsteps, his voice, even the sound of his car in the parking lot. Dr. Kalinsky watched this development with increasing concern. "It's imprinting on you," she said one evening, her tone grave. They were standing outside the recovery room, watching through the observation window as the pup played with an enrichment toy, a rope attached to a ball that smelled of rabbit fur. "See how it keeps looking toward the door? It's waiting for you." "Is that bad?" Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. "It's catastrophic. A wolf that seeks out human contact is a wolf that can't survive in the wild. We're supposed to be building wariness, teaching it that humans are dangerous, unpredictable. Instead, we're teaching it the opposite." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. "So what do? We start limiting your contact, feeding times only, and even then, minimal interaction. No talking, no eye contact, nothing that reinforces the bond. But it's still recovering. What it needs is to remember it's wild," Dr. Kalinsky interrupted, her voice sharper than usual. "What it needs is a chance at a real life, not a dependency that will get it killed the moment we release it." The words hung between them, brutal in their honesty. Ethan wanted to argue, to find some loophole or alternative, but he couldn't. She was right. He'd known from the beginning this was the danger, had promised himself he wouldn't get attached. But promises made in abstract were easier than promises kept in reality. The wildlife inspector arrived on a cold Monday morning in early November, 6 weeks after Ethan had found the pup in the forest. Her name was Victoria Chen, a federal wildlife biologist with 15 years of experience and a reputation for being thorough to the point of ruthlessness. She arrived in an official vehicle, carrying a tablet and wearing an expression that suggested she'd already made up her mind. Dr. Kalinsky gave her the tour, while Ethan hung back, trying to appear helpful but not intrusive. He'd spent the entire weekend cleaning, scrubbing enclosures, organizing supply closets, updating every record and chart to perfection. The facility looked better than it had in years. Inspector Chen examined everything with meticulous attention. She checked temperatures in the recovery rooms, reviewed medication logs, interviewed Dr. Kalinsky about protocols and procedures. Finally, she asked to see the wolf pup. They gathered in the recovery room, where the pup had been moved to a larger enclosure, still indoor but spacious enough for limited movement. The pup was resting on a platform, its leg no longer bandaged. Just a thin line of pink scar tissue visible where the surgical incision had healed. "It's made good progress," Inspector Chen observed, making notes on her tablet. "Weight? 14 pounds, Dr. Kalinsky replied, up from 9 when it arrived. "Eating solid food now, raw meat, some organs, simulating natural diet as closely as possible. Behavioral assessment?" There was a pause, almost imperceptible, but Ethan caught it. So did Inspector Chen. She looked up, her eyes sharp. "There are some concerns," Dr. Kalinsky admitted. "The pup has become comfortable with human presence, more comfortable than ideal for eventual release." Inspector Chen set down her tablet and approached the enclosure. The pup watched her approach, ears pricked forward, curious rather than fearful. When she moved closer, the pup stood and limped toward the front of the enclosure, its tail giving a small, hesitant wag. The inspector's expression darkened. "That's not comfort. That's habituation. It's treating humans like pack members." "We've begun implementing protocols to discourage that," Dr. Kalinsky said quickly. "Reduced contact, negative reinforcement when it approaches." "How long has this been going on?" Another pause. "Several weeks. But we're seeing improvement. Given time." "Time isn't the issue. Foundation is." Inspector Chen turned to face them fully, her expression stern. "Wolf pups imprint during a critical developmental window. If that window was spent learning that humans mean safety and food, reversing that conditioning is extremely difficult, sometimes impossible." Ethan felt cold dread settling in his stomach. "What are you saying?" Inspector Chen regarded him with something that might have been sympathy. "I'm saying this pup may not be a viable candidate for release. A wolf that approaches humans, that sees them as non-threatening, will end up shot by a rancher, hit by a car, or in a conflict situation that ends with euthanasia. We don't release animals we know will fail. But, Ethan's voice cracked, but it's healthy. The leg healed. It can run, it can hunt. Can it? Inspector Chen challenged. Has it been tested? Has it shown predatory instincts, wariness of humans, pack behavior, or has it spent 6 weeks being hand-fed and conditioned to depend on human caretakers? The silence that followed was damning. Ethan looked at Dr. Kalinsky, desperate for her to say something, to defend the pup, to argue. But she stood quiet, her jaw tight, her eyes reflecting the same devastating truth Ethan was only now fully confronting. They'd saved the pup's body, but in doing so, they might have destroyed any chance it had at a wildlife. Inspector Chen picked up her tablet, making final notes. I'm going to recommend denial of the long-term rehabilitation permit. The pup should be transferred to a wildlife sanctuary where it can live out its life in captivity or... She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. There has to be another option, Ethan said, desperation sharpening his voice. Give us more time. We can fix this. We can... Mr. Carter, is it? Inspector Chen's voice wasn't unkind, but it was firm. I understand you're the one who found the pup, that you've been instrumental in its care. That takes courage and compassion, but compassion without wisdom can be cruel. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do is acknowledge when our intervention has done more harm than good. She handed her card to Dr. Kalinsky. You'll receive my formal report within 72 hours. Make arrangements accordingly. Then she left, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, the door clicking shut with a finality that felt like a death sentence. Ethan stood frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Dr. Kalinsky moved to the enclosure, her hand pressed against the glass. The pup was still standing there, tail still wagging slightly, looking at them with trusting eyes that suddenly seemed like an indictment. I warned you, Dr. Kalinsky said quietly. I told you not to get attached. I told you this could happen. So that's it? Ethan's voice was raw. We just give up? Send it to live in a cage for the rest of its life, or worse? What do you want me to say? She turned to face him, and for the first time, Ethan saw that she was fighting tears. That I have a magic solution. That love and good intentions are enough? They're not. I've been doing this for 30 years, Ethan, and I've learned the hardest lesson there is. You can't save them all. Sometimes, despite everything you do, it's not enough. There has to be something. There isn't. The words came out sharp, echoing in the small room. Dr. Kalinsky took a breath, visibly composing herself. I'm sorry this is how it worked out. But we knew the risks from the beginning. We took a chance, and it didn't go the way we hoped. Ethan looked at the pup, now sitting and watching them with those intelligent, trusting eyes. 6 weeks ago, it had been a terrified, broken creature barely clinging to life. Now it was healthy, playful, curious about the world. They'd saved it. But had they? His phone buzzed, a text from his mother asking when he'd be home for dinner. Normal life, continuing on around him while his world collapsed. He'd spent weeks pouring everything into this, believing that effort and dedication could overcome any obstacle. But some obstacles were insurmountable. Some mistakes couldn't be undone. I need some air, he said, his voice hollow. He walked out of the facility and into the cold November afternoon. The sky was overcast, threatening rain. He walked without direction, hands shoved in his pockets, his mind churning with questions that had no good answers. He'd been so focused on saving the pup's life that he hadn't considered what kind of life it would be. He'd thought rescue and recovery were the finish line, not realizing they were just the beginning of a much more complex journey. And now, because of choices made with good intentions but poor foresight, the pup faced a future in captivity, or worse. His phone rang, his father. Hey, Dad, your mother said you sound upset. Want to talk? And suddenly, Ethan did. He told his father everything, the inspector's visit, the verdict, the impossible situation. His father listened without interrupting, the way he always did. When Ethan finished, there was a long silence. Then, "You did what you thought was right. That's all anyone can ask." But it wasn't enough. "No," his father agreed. "Sometimes it's not. But you gave that pup 6 more weeks of life than it would have had. Maybe they're not the weeks you hoped for, but they still count. They still matter. I don't know what to do now. You do what comes next. You face the consequences, you learn from them, and you keep going. That's what courage looks like in the aftermath, son, not the dramatic rescue, the quiet work of dealing with what follows." Ethan closed his eyes, feeling tears finally spill over. "I don't want to give up on it." "Then don't. Not yet. You've got 72 hours before that report is final. If there's any chance, any possibility you haven't explored, now's the time." After hanging up, Ethan stood in the parking lot for a long time, watching the sky darken. Then, slowly, an idea began to form. It was desperate, probably impossible, but it was something. He turned and walked back inside, finding Dr. Kalinsky in her office, staring at paperwork she wasn't really reading. "I have an idea," Ethan said. "It's crazy, but I think it might work." Dr. Kalinsky looked up, exhaustion etched in every line of her face. "I'm listening." And as Ethan explained his plan, desperate, audacious, requiring everything they had and more, he saw something shift in her expression. Not hope, not quite, but possibility, and right now, that was enough. Ethan's plan was both simple and audacious. Find a facility that specialized in wolf rehabilitation and rewilding. A place with the expertise, resources, and land to give the pup what they couldn't provide here. "There's a wolf conservation center in Montana," he explained, pulling up information on his phone. "The Northern Rockies Wolf Project. They work with habituated wolves, specifically wolves that can't be released immediately. They have a soft release program. Large wilderness enclosures where wolves learn to hunt live prey, establish pack dynamics, avoid humans. It takes months, sometimes years, but they have a success rate. Real releases back into the wild." "Doctor." Kalinsky leaned forward, reading the screen. "I know this program. Dr. Brennan runs it. She's one of the best in the field. But Ethan, programs like this are competitive. They have limited space, limited funding, and they prioritize wolves that have the highest chance of success." "So we make our case," Ethan said, the words coming faster now, fueled by desperate hope. "We document everything, the pup's recovery, its physical health, its intelligence. We show them it's worth the investment. We prove it deserves a chance. Even if they accept it, the transport alone, I'll drive it. I'll take time off school if I have to. I'll do whatever it takes." Dr. Kalinsky studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. Then, slowly, she nodded. "All right, let's try. But Ethan, you need to understand. Even if they accept the pup, even if everything goes perfectly, there are no guarantees. This is a long shot. It's more than we had 10 minutes ago." They worked through the night, assembling a comprehensive case file, medical records, weight charts, video documentation of the pup's mobility and behavior. Dr. Kalinsky wrote a detailed letter explaining the circumstances, the progress, the potential. Ethan compiled research on wolf rehabilitation success stories, statistics on soft release programs, anything that might strengthen their argument. At 2 a.m., they sent the application via email to Dr. Sarah Brennan at the Northern Rockies Wolf Project. The response came 18 hours later. Ethan was in calculus class when his phone buzzed. He glanced at it despite the no-phone policy and felt his heart jump when he saw Dr. Kalinsky's message. "Call me. Now." He asked for a bathroom pass and called from the hallway, his hand shaking. "She said yes," Dr. Kalinsky said without preamble. "Dr. Brennan reviewed everything and said yes. They have an opening in their juvenile rehabilitation program. She wants the pup there by the end of the week." Ethan felt his knees weaken. He leaned against the wall, unable to speak. "Ethan, You there? Yeah, he managed. Yeah, I'm here. This is real. It's real. Start making arrangements. This is happening. The next 3 days were a whirlwind. Ethan's parents, after a long family discussion, agreed to let him miss school for the drive. His father even volunteered to come along, understanding without being told that Ethan would need support for what came next. Inspector Chen, upon hearing about the Montana program, agreed to extend her decision pending the transfer. On Friday morning, under a slate-grey sky threatening snow, they prepared the pup for transport. Dr. Kalinsky had secured a specialized travel crate, large enough for comfort, secure enough for safety. They lined it with familiar blankets, added water and food, ensured proper ventilation. The hardest part was moving the pup from its enclosure. It had never been in a crate before, never been confined like this. When Ethan approached with the carrier, the pup backed away, sensing something was different, wrong. It looked at him with those trusting eyes, and Ethan felt his heart break into pieces. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I know you don't understand, but this is for you. This is so you can be free." It took 15 minutes and all of Dr. Kalinsky's expertise to coax the pup into the crate. When the door finally closed, the pup let out a howl, the first real howl Ethan had heard from it, mournful and confused and heartbreaking. Dr. Kalinsky secured the crate in the back of Ethan's father's truck, ensuring it was stable and protected from the elements. Then she turned to Ethan, her weathered face softer than he'd ever seen it. "You did good, kid. Better than good. You gave this animal a future. Will it remember me?" Ethan asked, then immediately felt foolish. "Sorry, that's a stupid question." "No, it's not." She squeezed his shoulder. "It'll remember. Maybe not consciously, not the way we remember, but something will stay. The feeling of being saved, of not being alone when it mattered most. That's not nothing." The drive to Montana took 11 hours, cutting through Oregon, Idaho, and into the vast wilderness of the northern Rockies. Ethan sat in the back seat beside the crate, his hand resting against the bars. The pup calmed after the first hour, settling into resigned acceptance. Occasionally, it would press its nose against Ethan's fingers, and he'd feel the warm breath, the wet nose, the living presence that had become so important to him. His father drove in comfortable silence, occasionally pointing out landmarks, mountain ranges, rivers, forests that stretched to the horizon. As they climbed higher into Montana, the landscape transformed into something wild and vast, a place where wolves still ran free. They arrived at the Northern Rockies Wolf Project just as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of amber and crimson. The facility was larger than Dr. Kalinsky's center, multiple buildings, expansive enclosures, forested areas that blended seamlessly with the surrounding wilderness. Sarah Brennan met them at the entrance, a tall woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "You must be Ethan. I've been looking forward to meeting the young man who carried a wolf pup 3 miles through the forest." "Thank you for accepting it," Ethan said, "for giving it this chance. Let's take a look at our new resident." They moved the crate to an assessment area, and Dr. Brennan conducted a thorough examination. The pup, now 4 months old and nearly 20 pounds, tolerated the inspection with surprising composure. Dr. Brennan checked the healed leg, watching as the pup walked, noting the slight limp that remained, but didn't impede movement. "This is good work," she said, glancing at the medical files. "The surgery was expertly done. Physically, this pup is ready for the next phase." "And behaviorally?" Ethan asked, the question he'd been dreading. "Doctor." Brennan was quiet for a moment, observing the way the pup watched Ethan, the way it oriented toward him, even in this unfamiliar space. "It's bonded to you. That's clear. But it's young enough, adaptable enough, that we can work with it. It won't be easy, and it won't be fast. But I've seen wolves come back from worse habituation. This one has a chance." Relief flooded through Ethan so powerfully he had to sit down. "How long before it's ready?" "Months, maybe a year, possibly longer." We'll start by introducing it to other juvenile wolves in our rehabilitation pack. They'll teach it things we can't: wolf communication, hierarchy, hunting behaviors. Gradually, we'll expand its territory, reduce human contact, simulate wild conditions. If it adapts, if it develops the necessary survival skills and wariness of humans, we'll move to soft release. And if it doesn't adapt, then it lives here. We have permanent residents, wolves that can't be released but live in large, naturalistic enclosures with minimal human interference. It's not wild freedom, but it's a good life. Better than most captive wolves experience. Dr. Brennan's assistant arrived to transport the crate to the juvenile rehabilitation area. As they lifted it, the pup began to whine, its eyes locked on Ethan. Can I say goodbye?" Ethan asked. Dr. Brennan nodded. "Make it quick, and make it final." Ethan knelt beside the crate one last time. The pup pressed against the bars, trying to reach him. He put his hand through, letting the pup lick his fingers, feeling the rough tongue and warm breath. "You're going to be okay," he whispered, his voice breaking. "You're going to learn to be wild, to be free. You're going to run with a pack and hunt under the stars. You're going to be everything you were meant to be. And he swallowed hard, "I'll never forget you. Never." The pup whined softly, and Ethan pulled his hand back, standing despite every instinct screaming at him to stay, to not let go. "Take care of it," he said to Dr. Brennan. "We will. I promise." They carried the crate away, and Ethan watched until it disappeared into a building, until the sound of the pup's whining faded into silence. His father's hand came to rest on his shoulder. "You did the right thing." "Then why does it hurt so much?" "Because it mattered. The things that don't hurt are the things that don't matter." They drove back through the darkness, the mountains silhouetted against a sky brilliant with stars. Ethan stared out the window, exhausted and empty, and somehow, paradoxically, more whole than he'd felt in years. He'd set out to save a life. In doing so, he'd discovered something about himself, a capacity for courage, for commitment, for loving something enough to let it go. The questions that had plagued him for months, about his future, his purpose, his place in the world, felt less urgent now. He didn't have all the answers, but he had a direction. 6 months later, Ethan received an email from Dr. Brennan. Attached was a video filmed from a distance, a pack of juvenile wolves playing in a meadow, tumbling and wrestling and practicing the skills they'd need to survive. In the middle of the chaos was a grey wolf, slightly smaller than the others, with a barely noticeable limp and a spirit that shone through even in the grainy footage. The subject line of the email read, "Thriving." Ethan watched the video a dozen times, tears streaming down his face, not from sadness but from overwhelming joy. The pup was alive. It was learning. It was becoming what it was always meant to be. That summer, Ethan started volunteering at Dr. Kalinsky's rehabilitation center regularly. He'd been accepted to a college program in wildlife biology, his application essay focusing on the lessons learned from a single grey wolf pup and the impossible choice between saving a life and setting it free. Sometimes, late at night, he thought about the pup, wondered if it ever thought of him, if somewhere in its wolf consciousness there remained a memory of a 17-year-old boy who'd refused to walk away. He'd never know, but it didn't matter. He'd given it a chance, and in return it had given him purpose. Some rescues saved the body. This one had saved 2 souls. Tell us in the comments where you're watching from and if you've ever witnessed or lived something like this.